What a weekend of baseball. Hello, everyone. Welcome in to First Pitch, your daily recap for MLB news, notes, just everything in general of MLB. And this weekend and this Monday, we're talking about those playoffs because this playoffs have been absolutely insane so far. I do not think it's going to change. And that's a great thing for us. Welcome in, and I'm Christian Rauh. You can find me on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh, R-A-U-H. And joined here on this marvelous Monday, I got Troy Brock with us. Troy, we can find you on Twitter at Troy B Baseball. Troy, this was a crazy weekend of baseball. I'm sure you were very excited after last night's Phillies victory, and we're going to get right to them in just a second. But overall, what was your overall feeling of baseball this weekend in the National League and American League division series?
Yeah, I mean, outside of two games on Saturday, this division series as a whole across the board has been fantastic. You know, you had the two games on Saturday that weren't very close in the Guardians and Tigers, and then the Phillies and Mets, both of those game ones. But then the other two games that day were back and forth, with the Yankees and Royals setting the major league record for lead changes in a single postseason game with, I think it was 5. And then yesterday, the Dodgers and Padres game wasn't close, but it was still exciting, even though it wasn't close. And the Phillies and Mets game was one of the craziest games ever played, just across the board. So it's been a fantastic weekend of baseball, and playoff baseball is outstanding. And I don't know how anyone could not be romantic about baseball.
Perfectly. Yeah, perfectly said. I agree. How can you not be romantic about baseball? Let's do a quick recap real quick before we dive into each of these series. Tigers and Guardians, they are 1-0 Cleveland after the game on Saturday. The Guardians defeated the Tigers 7-0. Yankees defeated the Royals 6-5. They have the 1-0 lead. They did not play yesterday, so they are only heading into game 2 starting today. And then we had 2 games each for the National League Division Series. Both of them are tied 1-1 after a 6-2 Mets win on Saturday, and then a crazy, as we mentioned, 7-6 Phillies win yesterday. As for the Dodgers and Padres series, everything is just falling into place in that one as well. We knew that one was going to be a crazy one. Dodgers win 7-5 on Saturday, take the first game lead in Ohtani's first ever playoff game. But then it turns around, gets crazy even with the fans, which I can't wait to talk about that later on in the show. And the Padres win to close out Dodger Stadium, at least for now, 10-2. Crazy, wild playoffs we had so far this weekend, and I want to dig right into it. Let's start off with your Philadelphia Phillies, Troy. And again, if you haven't noticed, or if you haven't paid attention over on social medias, and if you can find, again, Troy at Troy B Baseball, you've also started a Phillies podcast, the Phillies Faithful, with some excellent spelling, might I add. So we'll put that in the show description notes below as well, if you want to go ahead and get some more Phillies content. You show your wild side on that podcast a little bit. You get a little bit into it, especially the instant reactions a little bit after Saturday's game. Got a little wild over there, we'll say. But yeah, go ahead and check that out, guys. We'll put that in the show description below. But the Philadelphia Phillies, let's really dig into yesterday's contest more than anything. 7-6 on a walk-off win by Nick Castellanos. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of crazy things. Sarah Langs had a roller coaster of a wee tweet for sure. What's your thoughts on this game before we really dive into it and dissect it?
It was a crazy game. You know, the first 5 innings was pretty depressing as a Phillies fan, and then everything turned around from the 6th inning on, and it was edge of your seat, just excitement from the 6th inning on. As Adam Wainwright put it in a tweet and on the broadcast, it's one of the craziest games we've ever seen. So yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I think it was an amazing game, but we did just have a crazy wild card series between the Mets and Brewers, which was pretty wild. Then we also have game series of the World Series between the Cubs and at the one point the Indians. I don't know if I can't say it's the best game I've ever seen, but it was up there. It's definitely up there for playoff magic for sure. But there was a lot of things that went on with this Phillies game, right? First off, before the game even started, manager Rob Thompson decided to bench Phillies All-Star Alec Bohm. That was the thing. He went 0 for 4 in the game on Saturday. He entered the playoffs, finishing the regular season 2 for 27 at the plate. So he was struggling. Definitely some room for reasoning for why he got benched. they try to use it to jolt the offense. They bring in their hype man, Edmundo Sosa, which Rob Thompson believes he's the guy that motivates the team. It didn't really change that position in the spot because between Sosa and Bohm wound up coming back in as a pinch hitter, they still were 0 for. They were 0 for 4 in that spot, but it did wake up the rest of the bats. I don't know if you can blame it on that, but you got some good play out of Bryce Harper. You got some great play out of Nick Castellanos, which we'll talk about separately in just a second. And the Phillies hit for 10 hits. They picked up 7 runs. It was still, the offense started to pick up. And all of this mostly came after the 5th inning. In the 6th inning, you had back-to-back home runs from Bryce Harper and Nick Castellanos. Finally go ahead and got to Luis Severino. Before that, though, Severino was very good. He only allowed 3 hits in the outing before that 6th inning. He wound up finishing the day with 7 strikeouts. Once they finally got to him, they finally got to the bullpen, things started to change, Troy.
Yeah, and it took a turn for the better for the Phillies. That's 100% correct. And like you said, Bryce Harper had a fantastic day, but that's what we expect from Bryce Harper's fantastic days. Nick Castellanos with the walk-off. Cody Clemens had really good at-bats. He had 2 at-bats, came in to pinch hit for Johan Rojas late, and he had 2 really good at-bats. He went 1 for 2. But he's probably a guy that you should look to start in game 3, maybe just because he's had 3 plate appearances so far in this postseason. He's 2 for 3, and all 3 plate appearances have been some of the best plate appearances that the Phillies have put up in this postseason. And because the first 15, 14 innings of baseball, the offense just has not put up good plate appearances until that 6th inning yesterday when they remembered that they were in the postseason, and if they don't start putting balls in play and putting balls in the seats, they're going to be going home pretty soon and not going to be playing any baseball until February. But yeah, go ahead.
You talk about how they're at home with the Philadelphia Phillies and home field advantage being a big thing at Citizens Bank Park. Well, those fans only really saw 4 good innings of baseball from the Phillies. Now they're going to head to Citi Field, where it's all evened up. So really, home field advantage didn't come into play for something that we've talked about all season long. Like if Philly wins the division, it's going to be a game-changing event because of the home field advantage. It really didn't come into play. The Mets actually did a really good job holding the Phillies to that. Now, you can call it the hangover proportion of them having the bye week, maybe not blame the Mets. I don't know how you want to do that. I don't know if you want to call it the rest effect. I really don't care where your excuse lies in that portion. I'm going to go ahead and give it to the Mets and say, like, the Mets deserved a little bit of credit there because they held one of the hottest teams we saw in baseball all season long to 13, 14 strong innings before they finally crapped the bed a little bit towards the end in game 2. I am going to shift focus a little bit to the Mets here. We talked about Severino having a great game, but we need to go ahead and give some credit to Mark Vientos. What a game this guy had yesterday. He had 2 home runs. He also had another extra base hit, which I think was a double as well. Yep. And he is just coming on the scene as well. I mean, at one point, we talked about him being optioned back and forth in the minors last year. At this regular season, just this past year, he was having a hard time finding a spot on this roster. Now I can't think of a roster without him for the foreseeable future for the Mets. He finished the season with an 838 OPS so far this season in the postseason, small sample size, but he's got a 1.179 OPS, only 20 at bats. So keep that one in mind. But regardless, looking very good for the Mets. Add him along with guys like Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, who's finally starting to see it. If that core, if Alonso sticks around and you got a guy like Mark Vientos and Pete Alonso sitting on the 2 hot corners, that's going to be an impressive little core moving forward. I don't know if we have Pete Alonso moving forward. That's a whole different conversation. I'm sure we'll dig into that for sure in the offseason. No doubt about it. But how about Mark Vientos, Troy?
Yeah, I did not have Mark Vientos being the Philly killer on my 2024 bingo card in the postseason. That's for sure. But he has definitely been that so far, and he's turned a corner in his game. We're at a place right now, and the plate appearances that he's had over the 2 games just in this division series and really in the wild card too, that he, starting in 2025, people could start viewing him as the best player on the Mets, even if they do hold on to Pete Alonso, and even with Francisco Lindor still there. Yes, Francisco Lindor might have the upper hand on defense, but at the plate, Mark Vientos might be their best option just across the board. So this is what he's shown me lately.
I'll tell you what, if that happens, that's a great thing for the Mets because Lindor had an MVP type season this past year, and if you bring in Mark Vientos and he turns into being, even better than Lindor at the plate, that's a great thing for Steve Cohen and the rest of the team. I wonder what that's going to do for them in free agency. I wonder if that changes them, if it strengthens their idea, if it says, "Oh, hey, we got some good guys coming up the pipeline. Let's maybe hold back." Again, we're going to dig into that in this offseason, but it's going to be a very interesting kind of topic as well. Let's finish these guys off and talk about Nick Castellanos because he deserves his own little segment here. He was fantastic yesterday, 3 for 5, hits 2 home runs. He was on base for the majority of his outings. I think he had 3 runs himself coming in on the plate. I believe he was the run for the stout triple as well, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. So there was just a lot of great play by Nick Castellanos. And I guess, are you surprised? Because what we've seen from him in the past playoffs, he's been great, and he finally stepped up, and it seems like he's the guy. When you have Harper and Castellanos next to him, and by the way, Harper tied Schwarber's record for 12 postseason home runs as a Philly. But when you look at Nick Castellanos, and he kind of gets overshadowed by, of course, Bryce Harper and Trey Turner and Kyle Schwarber at the top of that lineup. What he has done so far this season, and he's kind of the glue guy, if you will, for this Phillies roster, and it's starting to show again in this postseason. Troy,
Yeah, he played all 162 in the regular season, and he's not showing it in the postseason. He's not showing any signs of fatigue, and this is what you expect from Nick Castellanos in the postseason. In the regular season, his numbers sit about middle of the pack all year long across the board every year, and then in the postseason, in his time with the Phillies, he's been one of the best hitters in the postseason, and he showed that once again yesterday with his home run to tie the game. And he was on base when he was one of the runners on base when Stott hit his triple, and he plays at a completely different level. His defense is even at a different level. There's a quote from him saying that when he's on defense in the postseason, he's more locked in than in the regular season, which not a great thing to say, but he shows it. And he made another fantastic play in right field yesterday that was very reminiscent of the play he made in the 2022 World Series, sliding to make a shoestring catch. And he doesn't do that in the regular season. So Nick Castellanos is apparently built for the postseason, and he's shown it time and time again with the Phillies.
well, I mean, hey, 162 is hard to manage. When you finally get to the postseason, you can see light at the end of the tunnel. You can see the goal in hand. You might not be able to see that in May. So as crazy as you probably don't want to hear that from one of your stars when you're sitting in April and you're sitting in maybe in June before the All-Star break. When you get to the postseason, you absolutely want to hear that because that's when the games matter most, right? So they don't play today. They do. Both the National League teams are off today as they travel. They will be back in action on Tuesday at Citi Field. Aaron Nola will get the ball against Sean Manaea. Should be a good one. We'll preview that one tomorrow. Let's dig into the other National League Division Series matchup between the Padres and the Dodgers. The Padres even the series 10-2 on some just absolute great baseball by San Diego yesterday. They got the Jack Flaherty, 5 innings. He let up 4 runs on 5 hits, including 2 home runs, one to Fernando Tatis Jr. in the first inning, and then he also let up one in the following inning to David Peralta. It looked like they got a little upset later on in that one because Flaherty and Manny Machado were found multiple times on the broadcast chirping back and forth. It even showed from one of the lip readers on socials that they were saying they'll meet each other out in the parking lot. I don't know how crazy that was the case, but there was a lot of wild things happening in that game yesterday, Troy. You were at Dodger Stadium. If you've ever been in that atmosphere at Dodgers and Padres, I've done it at Petco Park. I've never done it at Dodger Stadium, but there are a lot of fights. Those fans do not like each other, and it was even showing on the field. There was some, I guess you could say, some interactions between Jerkson Profar, the outfielder for the Padres, and the Dodgers fans. He robbed a home run. It was a absolute rob from Mookie Betts in at the beginning of the game, and he did not turn to show the ball until a little bit late. It was a little delayed, and they gave Mookie Betts the option to. He was celebrating. Went across. He was excited. He thought he got the home run until he got just about past second base. and then he realized that home run wasn't there. I think that was absolutely savage. I think that was absolutely savage, and I think that really set the tone to this game and why the Padres were able to take a 10-2 win on this one. There was also some more issues going on with the Dodgers fans throwing baseballs at Jerks and Profar. The game was delayed for 9 minutes to deal with fans. I don't really think that's a great look by the Dodgers fans, but I guess I'm not surprised because of what's going on with this rivalry. Well, let's get back to the game here because I could go on and on about fans and how you probably should stay in your seat and be the old man yell at cloud portion, but I'm not going to do that, Troy. Let's look at this game. There was a lot of things going on with this one. One of the biggest storylines here, Freddie Freeman getting injured yet again in this one. He did leave the game after only 2 at-bats. What's your thoughts overall on the Dodgers-Padres series?
Yeah, it's honestly, there's more fur flying in this one than there is in the Phillies and Mets, and that's been surprising to me. But it's been a great series. I mean, there's 24 runs scored total across the 2 games, and it's been pretty evenly matched across the board. As far as Freddie Freeman goes, I personally don't think they should have started him in the DS because of his sprained ankle. That's normally a 6 to 8 week injury, and they rushed him back in a week. And a sprained ankle is nothing to mess with. Yes, he doesn't do much as a first baseman. He mostly stands there and catches the ball from other people, but he does still have to run the bases, and standing on a sprained ankle is not fun. I have very weak ankles, and I have sprained my ankle many a time. It's not fun. I've never tried to play baseball on a sprained ankle, but just being a big man like myself and standing on one is not fun. And Freddie Freeman is a very, very tall man with a lot of weight put on that ankle.
Yeah, they said he was quoted this weekend heading into the series that they said, quote, "They told me this is a 4 to 6 week IL stint.
That's what it was.
But I'm
Yeah.
going to try and do this in a week in play." And I mean, getting him out there was, really good. I mean, seeing him play on Saturday was important, and then the beginning of the game on Sunday was good. He stole a base on Saturday. I mean, so it's not like he was completely just out of it. He wasn't Yordan Alvarez on the bases like the Astros had to deal with in the wild card series. But there was no obvious play in which Freeman really aggravated his ankle on the game on Sunday. So right now his status for the game on Tuesday is unclear. We'll see what happens about that. Xander Bogaerts also left the game for the Padres. So a little bit of injuries on each side. We'll see what happens moving forward. Regardless, this series evened up heading to Petco Park. Petco Park has been one of the most electric fan bases in all of baseball all season long. They've had the highest jump in percentage of fan attendance this year. They were selling out games on Wednesday afternoons, Troy. I mean, they were doing some really serious things in San Diego. We were talking about the Phillies fan base, but that might rival them this year, and they might even take the cake, if I'm being honest with you. I know you got a bias there, but I really do think that they might have took the cake this year. Jackson Merrill went 3 for 5 yesterday. He looked really good. A lot of really good things. And, of course, Tatis went 3 for 5. What about Tatis's OPS in the playoffs so far this year? When you look at it, and I think there was a thing on socials going out, and they were talking about comparing Fernando Tatis Jr., and they were comparing Mookie Betts with the postseason OPS. And I know Mookie hasn't having a great postseason so far, but 2.151 OPS for Fernando Tatis Jr. I don't think I've seen a 2 in a very long time. Now, again, this is only 14 at-bats, but he's got 3 homers in those 14 at-bats, 5 ribbies. He's 9 for 14 right now, and a lot of those are extra base hits. Pretty incredible from El Nino, don't you think?
Oh, it's fantastic. He's doing what Shohei Ohtani did over the last couple of weeks of the season. And really, I mean, Fernando Tatis is just a great player, and he gets overshadowed because of the Dodgers being in the same division. He doesn't get the same amount of notoriety that Shohei Ohtani or Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman does, and he's right up there on that same level with him. Maybe not on Shohei Ohtani. I don't know if anybody's on that same level, right. But what he's been doing in this postseason is incredible. And should the Padres and Phillies face off in the National League Championship Series, then the pitching versus the Phillies pitching versus Fernando Tatis is going to be something to watch for those potentially 7 games.
Well, we'll have to go at least 4 in this series, at least 4. And we'll see both games at Petco Park. If this game is going to go final, maybe it'll go back to Dodger Stadium. We won't know. But They are off today. They play on Tuesday at Petco Park. Walker Buehler against Michael King. Michael King coming off that very great playoff performance in the wild card. That one's going to be at 9:08 Eastern time on Tuesday. We'll preview that game as well as the Phillies Mets tomorrow's episode. All right, we didn't get these games yesterday, so they might be a little stale in the shelf life, Troy. But Yankees and Royals, Tigers and Guardians. Let's start with the Yankees side first. I mean, they played great over the weekend. As you mentioned, this was probably, to me, I think on Saturday, between the 4 games, this one had the most playoff baseball feel because it just kept going back and forth. I mean, every time you look, there was a new pitcher in playing chess between these two managers of Aaron Boone and Matt Quatraro. It was just a really interesting ball game. When you count the pitchers that were used in the game, you had 6 for the Royals, you had 5 for the Yankees. In the first game of the playoffs for the Yankees and then for the round for the Royals, you get 11 pitchers used in this one. And it was a chess match. The Royals only went 2 for 4 runners in scoring position. The Yankees, although they only won by 1 run, had way more opportunities, but they only went 2 for 13 in runners in scoring position. The hero of the day, Troy, you'd think, oh man, we got Aaron Judge, we got Juan Soto, we got Giancarlo Stanton, Jazz Chisholm. No, the hero of the day was Alex Verdugo. I mean, did you have that on your bingo card? Because I sure didn't. We were talking in September how Verdugo probably shouldn't even be on this roster moving forward. He comes into the playoff series, starts game 1, sits in the 9-hole, and picks up, probably the most crucial RBI of the game. He had some crucial catches in the outfield as well, too. I mean, this must not be the same Alex Verdugo we saw in the regular season, but regardless, those Yankees looked really good. We'll talk about the Royals in just a second, but a 6-5 victory, this is going to be a really interesting series, I think, the entire time. I would not be shocked if this one went 5.
Yeah, out of all of them, this one probably has the most likely going 5. And it's just this one was back and forth the whole time, and it was just a fantastic showing. Aaron Judge struggled, and the Yankees still pulled it out. And with the lineup that they have, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Giancarlo Stanton, Alex Verdugo. I mean, it's crazy. And Alex Verdugo's getting the start in game 2. Aaron Boone already announced that.
I mean, how can you not? How can you not give him the start after what you saw from him in game 1? Very impressive. You mentioned how Aaron Judge, he didn't have a great game on Saturday. He was 0 for 4, picked up 3 strikeouts. Well, Bobby Witt Jr. had 0 for as well. He was 0 for 5. So when you look at the battle of the 2 stars back and forth, he didn't really get much production out of them. Juan Soto was 3 for 5, though. He looked really good. His payday is just getting higher and higher, man. I mean, we're talking at least $500 million here without question. I think we're gonna hit 500 million, and I think that's gonna be like, if it's not 500 million, I think I'd be more shocked than if it was higher than that. Like, I'd be more shocked if it was 499 than I would be if it was 701. Right, I'd be super shocked in that case with Juan Soto. He's just doing absolutely everything he needs to secure the bag. And we'll see what happens moving forward with these Yankees if they can go even farther. This is a really tough series for the Yankees, for them to start off. We talked about at the beginning a couple of weeks ago back, I think it was on one of our Saturday episodes, you and I, if the Yankees couldn't even win their first round of the postseason, what does that mean for this team? Does that mean that it's time to let Aaron Boone walk? Is it time to do a lot of other things in the front office? But this is a really tough series to start off right off the bat with Vinny Pasquantino returning, Bobby Witt Jr. being at the top there, who rivaled Aaron Judge for the AL MVP this year. They're probably going to finish 1-2 in voting, and we're getting them in the American League Division Series against each other. Pretty cool storyline that not many people are talking about. Let's just assume that the Yankees can't finish off this series, Troy. Let's just assume that happens. Even if it goes to 5 games and they lose on a 9th inning blunder. So they're doing great until the final inning. They can't finish it off in the bottom of the 9th because it would be back at Yankee Stadium at game 5. What happens to this Yankees team if they can't do it? What happens? Anything?
If they can't do it, in my opinion, you've got to get rid of Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman. I mean, Cashman's been there for a long, long time, and he's probably overstayed his welcome. And Aaron Boone has most definitely overstayed his welcome, just with the lineup construction throughout the regular season being questionable, and then Brian Cashman refusing to promote Jason Dominguez earlier than September, and outside of when he filled in for a game or two while people were hurt. But Those two have got to go, especially if the Yankees cannot finish off the Royals in this division series. Then those two have to be on the outs.
We're going to the game 2 today. We'll preview this one just real quick. Cole Reagans versus Carlos Rondon. Garrett Cole struggled a little bit in the game on Saturday. He had Clay Holmes warming up in the 4th inning. He wound up working out of a pickle and doing a little bit well. But as we mentioned, 11 pitchers were used in the game on Saturday. So these pitchers are going to, both these teams are going to be looking for length from both these guys. Who do you like when you're looking at these two, between these two? Like, who do you think has the advantage in this one? Cole Reagans and the Royals or Carlos Rondon and the Yankees?
I think you got to give it to Cole Reagan and the Royals, just what Cole Reagan's has done over the whole season. And Carlos Rondon has not been consistent throughout the season. And he's dealt with injuries as he's done throughout his career and just been inconsistent. I think you got to give it to Cole Reagan's in this one and the Royals.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on this one. And by the way, I do agree with you. I think if they don't win this series, that something needs to change. But I feel like you can already smell the excuses a mile away, and I think nothing will happen. So that's where I'm at in there. I think both can agree there. This is going to be a crazy series. I think this is a pivotal game 2. If the Yankees can go up 2-0, I think that's huge. But if the series is tied heading in the Kauffman Stadium, that's a game changer. I think it might be. Yeah, we might be seeing 5 games if the Royals win today. This one's at 7:38 Eastern time. You can find this game on TBS nationally. Actually, both games today are on TBS back-to-back. So you don't have to change your channel, folks. Pretty interesting. All right, let's get into these Tigers Guardians because that was a fun game as well. Not for Tigers fans, but not for Tigers fans, but it was an overall interesting game. The Tigers have been absolutely on a rip since the trade deadline, starting off with a 0.2% chance, according to Fangraphs, to make the postseason. They wind up making the postseason. They defeat the Houston Astros in the wild card round, something that we thought was impossible to happen. We thought they were inevitable, but they wound up being not the case. Josh Hader falters. Then they get to the American League Division Series. They meet up with their friendly foe, right? They're good old buddies of the American League Central Cleveland Guardians. And they just put a 5-burger on them in the first inning and defeat them 7-0. It was absolutely. I think this was a wake-up call that the Detroit Tigers needed after, their big run. I think they were running a little bit too high on their shoulders, and I think they had to be reminded of, hey guys, let's remind ourselves this is a team that was sellers at the deadline, and we need to get back on our horse and see if we can beat these Guardians. They play well against each other. Don't get me wrong. This is not a surprise that they won 7-0 because if anybody can do it, it's your division team, your division rival. But for the first time in quite some time, Troy, we saw this bullpen game, this opener thing with Holton starting the game, then heading into Reese Olson and then so on, not work. I don't think you need to go away from it because quite frankly, I don't think they can based on the rest of their rotation, how it works. But it worked for the majority of the season. I think that you can point fingers of saying that was the reason why that they couldn't get things done. They started off with Holton. He couldn't even finish and get an out before letting up 4 runs. Okay, sure, that happens. You see that happen all the time. People have a bad outing or two. But it doesn't change the fact that this Tigers team couldn't score a run and only had 4 hits and 13 strikeouts in the game.
Yeah. You can't go away from it with their rotation, like you said. You can't go away from the bullpen game, even with the struggles. But it's the offense definitely has to step up and help in those bullpen games because in most bullpen games you can expect to give up a good handful of runs, and if your offense isn't doing their part, then you're not going to get too far in the bullpen games. But also, like you said, the Tigers were sellers at the deadline. They're playing with house money here more than the Atlanta Braves were in the wild card, in my opinion, because the Atlanta Braves bought at the deadline. The Tigers sold, so they were not expecting to be in the playoffs, period, much less in the divisional series. So you can only count this season as a win, regardless that they could get swept. They could lose the next 2 games, and you could still only count this season as a win with what they've done.
That's a good point. No, that's a really good point. I think them going this far already is an impressive feat, knowing that, they were looking for the future, trading for guys like Trey Sweeney when they traded Jack Flaherty away, who, by the way, started for the Dodgers in the game on Sunday. So, I mean, obviously them having Jack Flaherty would have been huge in this role. I'm not saying that they would have won this game if Jack Flaherty was there, because for the record, Jack Flaherty gave up 4 runs against the Padres in his outing, and they couldn't score a single run on this one. So I think there's a you can't throw the full blame on the pitching core, and I don't think that you should. And I don't think in any way that you should change from what's working. There's a reason you made the postseason since your crazy run in August. And one of those ways was putting in these guys, all of your bullpen guys, changing the way that you've been, managing your bullpen and your rotation and putting everyone in a high leverage situation. So when they get into the postseason, when they get into these things, no matter, regardless the inning, for the most part, honestly, probably 90% of the time, that they are figuring it out. And I think that's pretty good odds to have. 90% of the time might not happen in the postseason, though. Postseason's a different beast. We all know that. And we'll see what happens for the rest of this series. One guy I want to mention here, and I think that this is a pretty polarizing figure for the Detroit Tigers right now. Spencer Torkelson, first baseman right now. He had an up and down year. He found himself in Toledo for a very long time, comes back, has a great August, great September, hits back into the postseason, and so far is 0 for 8 with only 1 run in. So he has not had a hit so far in the postseason. This is a guy who was drafted in the first round, first overall pick in 2020. There's a lot of people are thinking there's not a future for this guy on the roster because of what happened this season. A lot of people are on social medias are calling him the biggest bust in Tigers history, which is quite a thing to hold. If we're talking at a spot right now where he's only 25 years old. There's still a lot of baseball left in Spencer Torkelson, but if we don't see production from him, is there a lot of weight on his shoulder for this team? I think in my mind, him getting the call down and call back up kind of took that away from him a little bit, saying, okay, your role has changed now that you've done your couple months in Toledo and you're back up. However, there's got to be this little chip on his shoulder still, knowing that he has been the first overall pick at one point in time. And, he was the golden child of the Tigers trying to make something happen. It's not happening so far. What do you think needs to happen from this guy if you think there's a future for Spencer Torkelson in Detroit?
I think he just needs to take a step back, take a breath, and just let the game come to him. It seems like he's just pressing too hard. Like you said, it could be because of the being the number 1 overall pick 4 years ago. And he's still only 25. I mean, he's still got a long way to go. He's not even in his prime yet. And he struggled in the postseason, but look at some of the other names that struggle in the postseason. Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman were bad last year in the postseason. Mookie Betts is struggling this year in the postseason. Aaron Judge has always struggled in the postseason. And those guys are top tier of Major League Baseball. So the postseason it's too small of a sample size to make a definitive opinion on a player, whether they're good or bad in the just off the postseason alone. And Torkelson wasn't great in the regular season for the whole season, but he was great in August and September. And I think that he's just got to take a step back and take a breath. Stop listening to the fans. Don't get on social media. Just go out there, play ball, let the game come to you, and use those abilities that you have to do what you know you can do.
I know we talked about the Tigers a lot here, but they're just such an interesting team. So we need to give the Guardians some flowers here because they won 7-0, right? They looked really good in this one. I think they had some good pitching. Tanner Beebe looked really good, 4.2 innings, scoreless baseball. And then they went out and used 4 relievers in this one. They even went out and used Emmanuel Clase, even though they were up 7-0 to get some innings work. And I actually sent you a message during the game and said, I can't believe they're using Clase. But because they had that off series because they didn't have to play in the wild card round, knocking off some rust seems to be pretty important. He didn't look like he had any rust on him, by the way. 8 pitches, 5 strikes, and 1 strikeout, all he needed to close out the 9th inning against the Tigers in this one. But one guy that I think we have to talk about, Troy, Lane Thomas. After the trade deadline, they went and got him at the deadline. They picked him up from the Nationals, 657 OPS. He had a 209 batting average, and that's after a little bit of a nice stretch to end the season. He comes into the playoffs, which at one point, I think I told Lindsay on this show that he might have been the worst trade at the deadline. And I think I still stand behind that if Cleveland didn't make the postseason because of what happened with his stats in the regular season. But how fitting is it that he hits a home run in the first inning off Reese Olson, I mean, just incredible. The only home run so far of the Guardians postseason run so far. You would think, oh man, it's probably going to be Jose Ramirez. He's hit a lot of them, right? He didn't get a chance to get his 40th home run in the game that was canceled in the last game of the season. He's got one in the bank ready to go. Or no, maybe it'll be Josh Naylor. He's a pretty good hitter. Maybe even Stephen Kwan will figure it out because he sometimes gets lucky in the leadoff spot. Or David Fry, who had a good start. No, Troy. It's Lane Thomas, the guy who you thought was turning into a bust of a trade, turns out to be your first postseason hero for the Guardians in 2024. I mean, this is exactly why baseball is one of the most interesting, amazing, beautiful sports that we have in the entire world.
Yeah, it's he that hot streak he had at the end of the season carried over into the postseason. It's like he remembered that he was playing baseball and and not just sitting at home hanging out with his wife and kids. But yeah, I mean, what can you say, really? That home run was big for the Guardians, and we'll have to see if he can keep it up across the rest of the postseason for the team. But it was fantastic. Again, how can you not be romantic about baseball?
All right, before we get out of here, let's preview this series today at 4:08 Eastern Time. Tarek Scuber, we don't need to worry about the bullpen game because you have the American League Cy Young winner going up. He hasn't won it yet, but he will, folks. Don't worry.
Oh yeah,
He's going up against. We got Boyd on the mound. It's going to be a pretty interesting game. Matthew Boyd. I should make sure I say his first name. It's going to be a really interesting matchup. I think you obviously have to give the advantage to Scuba, though, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, he's the best pitcher in the American League, hands down. He's the American League Triple Crown winner, and like you said, he's going to win the American League Cy Young. So you have to give the advantage to Scooball and the Tigers.
This one went a little long, but that's okay. That's what we're here for. Playoff baseball is going to be exciting, folks. We're going to be back here tomorrow previewing the rest of the series. We're going to talk about those 2 American League games that we have today. So enjoy the games. We'll be back here. If you see some news, if you see some questions, if you have anything for us, hit us up in the comment description below. Hit us up on Twitter at First Pitch IBPN, or you can find us on Twitter separately. You can find me on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh, R-A-U-H, or Troy at Troy B. Baseball. But until then, we'll be back here with another episode of First Pitch. Take care.